1963, Koresh's mother left her boyfriend and placed her 4-year-old son in the care of his maternal grandmother, Erline Clark. And his mom returned when he was 7 after her marriage to a carpenter named Roy Haldeman. And I thought it was kind of funny, the carpenter aspect, just because, Koresh would later claim that he was the Messiah. You know what I mean? It's just a weird little thing there. And Koresh later was a carpenter, correct?
What's that?
Koresh was later like an independent carpenter, correct?
I don't know that. I don't know if that's truly what he was. I mean, it would fit with, like you said, Messiah, because Jesus Christ was a carpenter, so it would fit with that belief. To add to that mystique, because Koresh was convinced himself and convinced others that God talked to him and told him to change his name to David Koresh and told him to go through with all this. So that would make sense in the context of what we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, Koresh kind of described his childhood as lonely, and he didn't really do well in school, and the reason for that is he was dyslexic. He got put in special education classes, and he had a couple of nicknames. Fellas, do you have any ideas what his nicknames were? One was Bernie. Do you know the more well-known one, more offensive one?
Retard.
You're close, Vic. You're close. They called him Mr. Retardo.
That's awesome.
Now when you think of Koresh, you'll think of Mr. Retardo. And Blake, before anybody gets offended, I didn't come up with that. It was his schoolmates. That tells you the type of assholes kids really are, though.
I believed it was his schoolmates. I mean, it would also fit in with that kind of profile that we seem to run into with the serial killers. Home life is really, really weird and jacked up, and just just really precarious relationships. And then school isn't any better. So you get bullied at home, bullied at school, and people wonder how much of nature versus nurture influences the actions of these people. I am not glorifying hurting anybody, but it seems to be a common thread shared amongst most of the serial killers we've discussed on this show. There's something wrong at home, and there's certainly something wrong in public, at school or wherever other institution they're at. So.
I have to tell you, I think this is like as much of a debate as what makes somebody gay. And I'm not being funny here. I'm serious. Because it used to be the nature or, it was environment or born that way about gay people. Did they become that way? Were they born that way? And I still feel like it's as different as some of these serial killers or people with this type of background. Some people, they are end up being that way because of their life, what's happened in their life. Then there's other people that are just born that way, and no matter what kind of quote-unquote manly things you get them to do, they're still that way. You can't break them of that. There's no, you know what I mean? So I feel like this type of mentality, and again, I'm not comparing it and saying that either one's, that being gay is evil. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that some things are bred in you and other things you're born with. Just
yep, that makes sense. True story.
And it's interesting to me, too, because, again, if there was a little change in his life, would it have made a difference? I don't know. I tell you the change in his life that would have made a difference if he had made it in his music career, just like Manson. This is where I see their parallel. Both of them were wanting to be musicians, and because neither one of them really succeeded at that, they really chose a different fucking path, I wonder if Jim Jones was into music.
I wonder if who?
I know he was in Jim Jones. I know he was into selling monkeys to people, door to door.
I don't know. It is weird because I see the music thing. Having been in the business and retired, I can see the allure of it. But it's would that have really made a difference? Because you're trading in what one would perceive as regular sort of average life in for that. Temptation would still be there, trust me. After having been on the road for 5 years and cut all these records and been on the radio and seen what the inner machinations of the music industry are like, there are plenty of temptations, plenty of ways for you to veer off that the straight and narrow and go onto the wide road that everybody travels down because, it's easy to get down. So it's like, I don't know if it would have made a difference. You would hope, ideally, that something like that would have made a difference. But then you just don't know. We could speculate all we want to, and that's another one of the things about this. I mean, we could speculate till, morning, but we'll never know. And I guess that's part of what makes it so alluring to us is because we just don't. It's the idea of knowing, maybe, or thinking, being positive, or hoping that maybe something like that could have changed somebody, but then you don't know. That's like saying maybe Albert Fish wouldn't have been like he was if he would have had a different upbringing or a different career path. We don't know. We just know what he was in the current one that he had, Just
exactly. And let's be honest. I mean, there are people who come up from bad backgrounds, Blake, you know how that is, and they don't do shit like this. So really, at the end of the day, it's still a choice,
Well, thank you. I guess I should take that somewhat as a compliment, even though you guys are asking and give me so much trouble all the time. But yeah, you're right. Just because you have a background that's like that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that you're going to end up going down that same path. In that case, nature versus nurture doesn't apply on that level. So again, it's just speculation. I mean, you could speculate, like we said, till morning. You just don't know. But it's just something about this, and I think part of it is the kids, which I'm sure we'll get into later. You and our parents, Travis, we feel
Vic
this
probably is too. He just doesn't claim them.
Huh?
Probably.
I said Vic probably is too. He just doesn't claim them.
That's okay. But yeah, you just don't. It struck me on a completely different level, especially when I read about what was supposed to have been happening inside the Waco compound versus what was said later. It's like, I don't want to give too much of it away for the listeners, but let's just say this isn't as cut and dry as people might think it is, or it doesn't seem to be. Well, I don't think we'll ever know the truth 100%. I know that fault has been placed on both sides of the fence, but we won't ever know the middle fence, the middle side, the person in the middle who got to see everything and know. We won't get to hear that. But for me...
We'll editorialize at the end for sure and give our opinions.
What's that?
I said we'll editorialize at the end and give our opinions on what happened and what we think of it, that type of thing. I'm just trying to give whatever facts we can until then. So it's just, one of those things where it's like, I don't know, at the end of the day, we may never know. But such is life. We've done Zodiac. We've done things like that. So we got to roll with what we have. But good old Mr. Retardo, he dropped out of Garland High School in his junior year. When he was 22 years old, he had an illegal sexual relationship with a 15-year-old girl who became pregnant. Now, I assume it was illegal because her parents didn't consent, because in Texas the legal age of consent with parents' consent was 14 all the way up until like a couple years ago. So that's what I think. I think they didn't approve. He got her pregnant. He was like, shit. So he had a side chick too. So this fella, he was spreading his seed all around, which is it became pretty common for him, I have to say. Around this time, he decided, okay, well, it's time to be a born-again Christian in the, Blake mentioned it earlier, Southern Baptist Church. And he joined his mom's church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. That's where he became infatuated with the pastor's daughter. Big mistake there. Can you fucking imagine? Like, of all the girls to go after, aside from somebody who just kicked the shit out of you, that's got to be like the worst possible, person's kid that you could go after, other than maybe a cop. Fuck that. Horrible, especially if you're in the church. So anyway, supposedly while he's praying for guidance, he opened his eyes and allegedly found the Bible open at Isaiah 34:16, which stated that none should want for her mate. And then he was convinced this was a sign from God. So he approached the pastor and told him that God wanted him to have his daughter for a wife. Sure, this went over really, really well. I'm not sure how old the daughter was. Blake, any idea? I know I had heard it before, but I'm not sure now. Maybe she was like 14.
The daughter?
Yeah.
I don't know, to be honest.
I can't remember either. It may never have been mentioned. There's a whole lot of like 14 and 15-year-olds mentioned, so it's easy to get them confused. But the pastor threw him out, and when he continued to persist with his pursuit of the daughter, he was expelled from the congregation. Not the best way to stay in a congregation, I have to assume. So, 1982, the year of my birth, he moved to Waco, Texas, where he joined the Branch Davidians. And they shouldn't be confused with the original Davidian Seventh-day Adventist group. They're actually an offshoot. The original person who, Benjamin Rhodes, who died in 1978, originated the Branch group in 1955 with new teachings that weren't connected with the original Davidians. So, yeah, it's just a little bit different, but all cults are the same to me. Koresh played guitar and sang in church services at Mount Carmel Center. His band played a few times at clubs in Waco, and former members such as David Thibodeau, who's, by the way, is like in every single documentary about Waco. Big fat guy. Like, he's in every single documentary. He wrote a book about it. I personally think a lot of things he says are full of shit, but on the other hand, you do get the accounts of being in the cult. So he wrote that he was recruited. They were recruited through music. Anyway, Koresh also tried to pursue his own record company, but he wasn't successful due to lack of funds and support. So there you go. Well, the story of how he became the leader of the Branch Davidians is a really interesting and fucked up one. So in 1983, Koresh began claiming the gift of prophecy, which was the big thing for the Branch Davidians. Their leaders were always claiming to be prophets. That's the deal with them. So they're not just looking to these old prophets, they're claiming their prophets as well. So I think that makes them a little bit different than most religions, or at least Christian, Christian sects or whatever you want to call them. Anyway, it's speculated by Thibodeau in his book. I don't even think this is speculation either. Thibodeau's book, his 1999 book, is called A Place Called Waco. That Koresh, he had a sexual relationship with 68-year-old Lois Rhodes, who was the widow of Benjamin Rhodes and leader of the sect. Like I said, she was in her late 60s, and eventually she claimed that God had chosen him to father a child with her who would be the chosen one. I would love to see how that would have worked out with a 68-year-old holding this child. That would fucking be great. I'm sure that would turn out well as this whole thing, I'm sure. So anyway, in 1983, Lois Rhodes allowed Koresh to begin teaching his own message called the Serpent's Root, which caused strife and controversy in the group. Lois Rhodes' son, George Rhodes, intended to be the group's next leader and considered Koresh an interloper. Well, George Rhodes, I don't know if you guys have seen any documentaries about this guy. He just looks like a big fat redneck. Vic, you know who he looks like a little bit? Remember the guy, and Blake, the guy who said, now you ain't planning on fucking them chickens, are you? From Devil's Rejects? That's who this guy looks like a little bit. Fat redneck. So when Koresh announced that God had instructed him to marry Rachel Jones, who then added Koresh to her name, Rachel was, I think, 15? I'm not sure about that, though. There was a short period of calm at Mount Carmel Center, but it proved to be, temporary. So there was a power struggle now. George Rhodes, who claimed to have the support of the majority of the group, forced Koresh and his group off the property at gunpoint. What an awesome religion. Dude, there's got to be some religions like that in Kentucky right now, Vic, especially in our city. Fuck.
Well,
I'm trying to remember. Let's see. All right, here we go. So in 1985, Koresh and around 25 followers set up camp at Palestine, Texas, 90 miles from Waco, which I think the name is interesting, Palestine, or Palestine. They lived under, shitty conditions and bushes and tents for the next 2 years. And during that time, Koresh actually recruited new followers in, California, United Kingdom, Israel, Australia. And he also traveled to Israel, where he claimed he had a vision that he was the modern day Cyrus. Like, this dude is just coming up with all sorts of shit.